Unfortunately, I once again find myself defeated by the scorching heat outside. And just as I did with the review of the Peugeot E3008, basically the new Peugeot 3008, that's what I'm going to do today over here, because today we are testing the new Ford Kuga Facelift. Luckily for me, the Kuga Facelift didn't change that much on the outside in terms of design. So yeah, I think that's not going to be an issue for my presentation, the fact that I'm doing it all from the inside. But I do apologize for not stepping outside. There are almost 40 degrees Celsius outside right now, and I really didn't want to get sunstroke. So if you want to keep watching, go ahead. If not, go ahead. It's your choice. But I think that what I'm about to tell you doesn't really need an exterior presentation. So let's talk about the Ford Kuga for starters. Well, this is a car that proved to be more popular for Ford than even they anticipated. I am absolutely certain of it, because I had the opportunity to sit down with a couple of people from Ford, and they were taken by surprise by the car's popularity. That manifested a lot more in the last few years, because the Kuga became the best-selling plug-in hybrid SUV in Europe, period, in 2022, 2023, and it could be in 2024. So that's a very big achievement. And of course, the fact that the Kuga plays in the compact crossover SUV, whatever you want to call it, segment, does play a huge part in this success, because that's the most popular segment in Europe right now. But being the best-selling plug-in hybrid, nobody expected that. I mean, when you think about hybrids, you basically think Toyota, you think other brands, not necessarily Ford. Well, they hit it out of the park with this one, and the way they did it is quite interesting too, because they did it with Japanese technology. Few people know that what we have here on the Kuga hybrid and plug-in hybrid is basically a Toyota drivetrain. Yes, at the dawn of hybridization in passenger cars, Ford and Toyota were at the forefront, and they had a similar solution developed for their cars. And they realized that, you know what, in 1997, mind you, this could lead to some issues later down the line. So they patented technologies. Ford yielded in favor of Toyota on the hybrid side of things, and Toyota yielded in favor of Ford on the diesel and some other technology front. So basically, Toyota got all the rights for this setup, while Ford was allowed to use the same setup but under a license. So what do we have on a Toyota? So what do we have on the Ford Kuga in terms of technical background, so the technical side of things? Let's talk about what's under the hood. So we have a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engine. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? That uses the Atkinson cycle, and for this new facelift version gained 3 horsepower. So we're talking about a 155 horsepower engine. Now this engine is aided in its duties by 2 electric motors, as you would expect. There's one motor that basically powers the car, and there's one that works as a generator, as an inverter, as a sort of clutch, and so on, but it doesn't feed power directly to the wheels. So this car can run on electricity alone. It doesn't matter if it's a plug-in hybrid or a full hybrid. It can power the wheels using the electric motor alone. It can power the wheels using the internal combustion engine, and it can power the wheels using both energy sources. So the electric motor has 132 horsepower, and in total this car can deliver up to 243 horsepower. So that's an increase compared to the old model. But that's not because, as you probably noticed, that's not because the power output of any of the components increased. It doesn't have more. It has 3 extra horsepower on the petrol engine. It has this exact same electric motor. So that's not why this car has more power. It's just the way they are combined and the way they deliver power to the wheels. Now, what I should also point out is the fact that while the normal hybrid version can be had with all-wheel drive, the plug-in hybrid version can only send power to the front wheels. The reason why that is because we have the battery pack for the plug-in hybrid model right here under the front seats, and therefore there's no room for a transfer case, for a planetary arrangement to feed the power to the rear axle. One alternative would have been what Toyota did with the RAV4. Basically, they installed an additional electric motor on the rear axle, and that's why some RAV4 models have all-wheel drive. But Ford decided against it, and I can kind of understand there's no need for all-wheel drive in these cars. If you want to buy a full hybrid version, you have 180 horsepower, so less than on the previous model, but you can also get the all-wheel drive version, which has 183 horsepower, depending on your needs. Maybe you live up in the mountains and you need all-wheel drive, you can get that as well. But where does Mazda fit in? Because I did mention Mazda earlier. Well, that 2.5 liter up front is a Mazda engine. Well, it's an older Mazda engine, but it was developed by Mazda and it's still made for Ford under license. So yeah, you have a lot of Japanese components on this car, actually. Not exactly made by the Japanese, but they are done in their philosophy of doing things. And that, in my book, is definitely a good thing. If you look at any reliability ranking anywhere in the world, the Japanese cars are number 1, 2, and 3 most of the time, while American, especially Ford cars, are not. There's a reason why people jokingly say Ford actually is an acronym for fix or repair daily. They don't have the best reputation in this regard. But with this engine, with this setup, with this eCVT gearbox that we have on this car, these cars have actually proved to be incredibly reliable. The engine itself is very simple, not complicated at all, while the electric motor and the gearbox, if you want to call it that, they are also very easy to use and very reliable overall. They have very simple designs, so they will last for a long time. Basically what we have here, to be completely frank, is a Ford with a Toyota drivetrain, and it actually works brilliantly, if I could say so, because it does feel like a Toyota in many regards, especially in the way this car drives. So having an eCVT gearbox is not ideal for those looking for the best handling or driving car out there. I can totally understand that. It does have that traditional drone inside, but once you get used to it, I think it's actually pretty good. And I think Ford did a good job in setting it up, because it doesn't feel as laggy as Toyota products, even though Toyota has done some improvement on its car recently as well. Also, on the technical side of things, this is just a facelift, so not a lot has changed. The battery remains roughly the same, 14.4 kilowatt hours on this plug-in hybrid version, out of which you can use almost 11 kilowatt hours, basically 10.7 says the tech sheet. According to Ford, that means you should get a real life range out of this car between 60 and 69 kilometers. I did my usual range test. It took me a long time, and I got 48.5 kilometers out of this car. So let's round it up to 50 kilometers an hour, because I did have some extra 3 kilometers of range shown in the dashboard when the internal combustion engine kicked in. So I think you could squeeze 50 kilometers of range out of it, which is really close to what Toyota claims, to what Ford claims with its 60 kilometer entry claim. So yeah, pretty good results. After that, the fuel consumption around town was 6.2, 6.3 liters per 100 kilometers covered, which is not bad with the battery empty. Well, it's not completely empty, because the way these systems are done is whenever even the car shows you that the battery is empty, it's not really completely depleted, because you still have that 3 kilowatt hour buffer in it to allow you to use the car as a hybrid. So even though you're not driving on electric mode alone, you still use the electric motor a lot for setting off, for slowing down, and you still feed energy into the battery to replenish its resources whenever you're slowing down, for example, because the car uses regenerative braking. So you're still driving the car in a hybrid fashion, and that improves its efficiency. 6.1 to 6.3 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers covered in a busy city like Bucharest, which is ranked third worst in Europe. I don't think it's a bad result whatsoever. And driving this car is actually very easy. It feels like an electric car most of the time. You rarely get to hear the internal combustion engine while you're driving it, and it's actually pretty good. What I don't particularly like is the suspension, but I understand why it behaves this way. So it feels kind of stiff, not necessarily uncomfortable, but very stiff over certain bumps. And I know that's because the suspension had to be stiffened up to cope with the extra weight of the batteries under the floor. So yeah, it's not exactly the most comfortable car, but at least the suspension is quiet. So you don't get a lot of noise inside the cabin from it, but the car does like to hop around on certain surfaces. Other than that, it's pretty easy to drive. Very spacious, as you can see. Nothing changed in that regard. The old model was very spacious as well. What's interesting is that you probably noticed that it's quite a different approach compared to other car manufacturers to have the battery for the plug-in hybrid version under the two front seats, not in the back. But I think Ford did that to keep the trunk as usable as possible. And on this car, we also have a spare tire, which is something of a rarity in the industry today. And we still have a minimum of 411 liters of space, but you can adjust the rear seats. They slide forwards and backwards, the seat backs as well. So you can adjust them 15 centimeters forward and you get about 120 liters of extra space in the boot. So you get up to 550 liters of space, which is pretty good for a car of this size in the C segment. And the Kuga doesn't really exceed the size of the segment that much. It's 4.6 meters long, 1.9 meters wide, so roughly within the confines of the C segment. I wouldn't call it a bigger car than the average by a big difference, but yes, it is slightly over the edge. So a lot of room in the back as well. Not gonna sit back there, but there's plenty of room even for people of my size. I'm 6 feet tall, and I fit in the back perfectly behind this driver's seat, adjusted to my comfortable driving position. And in terms of changes compared to the old model, well, let's start with the exterior. Not a lot has changed. The front end has been slightly retweaked, and we have slimmer headlights with a new LED daytime running light setup, and we have a light bar between the two headlamps, and all the cars now come with LED lighting as standard, but in different guises. So for example, this car has the standard LED lights. Basically they change from the high beam to the low beam automatically, but that's it. But you can also get the advanced adaptive LED headlamps, which do that trick with the shadows around the car in front of you and lighting up everything around the car in front of you to give you the best perspective possible. So yeah, we have the new Ford logo on the front end. The rear end has been even less changed because we only have some slight tweaks done to the tail lights, and that's about it. We have a couple of new colors and a couple of new wheel sizes, but we do have some different choices when it comes to the packages offered, the equipment lines. So the starting point is titanium, then you have ST line, you have ST line X, we have the ST line X. The biggest difference is some bit of chrome on the sides of the front bumper. Then you have the active versions and the active X versions. Those are meant for the people looking to buy this car and use it off-road, because they have a lot of skid plates and so on, so the car looks a bit more rugged and ready to conquer tougher trails. But other than that, yeah, the differences aren't huge between them. Even between titanium and ST line, the differences aren't that big. You have everything you could possibly wish for in terms of creature comfort. So we have 3-zone climate control. We have plastic door cards, softer in the front, harder in the back. We have this interior with the seats done in Alcantara and synthetic leather, and the changes inside are fixed over here. So I don't really like the changes they've done, to be honest, because they ruin the ergonomy of things. For example, the buttons for the driving modes have disappeared. They are now included in the multimedia system. So for example, I want to change the driving mode, right? So I got to go to home, then features, and drive modes, and choose a different driving mode from over here, which is not exactly ideal. Most of the time people, I'm guessing, will not be using them anymore. So yeah, you have normal, eco, sport, and slippery mode. Then there's another issue. They moved all the climate control buttons, which used to be over here. They moved them in the screen as well. So you find them at the bottom of the screen, but you still have to take your eyes off the road to adjust them. So yeah, not exactly perfect in my book. I preferred the old version. Now we have a 13.2 inch screen over here with Sync 4 and 5G connectivity. So basically we have 2 antennas at the back, one for GPS and radio, one for 5G. So the car has internet connectivity, and Ford says that they have doubled the processing power of this infotainment system. I don't really believe them, because it's still pretty laggy in certain situations. So I don't know if you can notice, but let's go into apps. So I don't know if you can notice, but there is some lag in the way this screen responds. So they could do better. We also have a digital instrument cluster. I think that comes as standard, and that's about it. I do like the fact that they improved the quality of the rear view cameras. That is a noticeable improvement. So what's left to say? Oh yes, so I talked about the real life range inside the city. I talked about the fuel consumption inside the city, but what about outside? Well, on a B road such as this one, the car had an average fuel consumption of around 5 liters per 100 kilometers covered, while on the highway I saw an average of 7.3. So predictable. You will notice that the car starts drinking a lot more gasoline, if I can say so, as the electric motor is used less and less. So the less you use the electric motor, the more fuel you're going to use. Normally, this is a plug-in hybrid. You have to recharge it to use it as it was intended to be used. So if you don't have the possibility of recharging it at home or at work, recharging will take about 3 hours. You shouldn't buy one. You should probably get the full hybrid version. That one also comes with the same engine, same transmission, everything is the same, but you can get it with all-wheel drive if that matters to you. Both versions can tow up to 2,100 kilos. That's something Ford was peculiarly adamant about. I guess it matters for some people. So yeah, that's what you can do. Pricing, well, pricing is quite curious. You can still buy the old Kuga on certain markets, and this one has a lower starting price. So it starts with various promotions Ford uses at about 26,000 euros, which is pretty damn good, but that's for the 1.5 liter turbocharged EcoBoost version with 150 horsepower, front wheel drive and manual gearbox. So not for this one. These hybrid versions, well, depending on the country you're in, will vary, but the one we're driving has a price tag of 45,000 euros with some discounts from the government and from Ford. You can buy it with under 37,000 euros. That's a pretty damn good price. In terms of rivals, I can list the Kia Sportage plug-in hybrid, the Hyundai Tucson plug-in hybrid, the Toyota RAV4 plug-in hybrid. There is a number of cars in this segment, plug-in hybrids, that could rival with the Kuga. But the pricing is really good on Ford, and that's why they have been plug-in hybrid champions for the past 3 years. Now, personally, I really like the car. I think it's very spacious. I think it's really good, well sound insulated, and it has a brilliant fuel consumption. For example, for the past 855 kilometers, I have a B trip computer over here. The average fuel consumption is 5 liters per 100 kilometers covered. And if you charge the car constantly, I think you could get even better numbers. So yeah, it's not bad at all. You can buy a Ford with a Toyota Mazda drivetrain, which is pretty awesome in my book. But I want to know what you guys think about it. So let me know in the comments if you think the Kuga is still a good deal in Europe. And until next time, of course, don't forget to feed your passions. Ciao.